Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Leah. I work at the library and I plan events. And welcome to the second installation of our the library's alternative energy series. And last week we had IML come out and talk about the future of nuclear in Wyoming. And today we are continuing with the future of solar in Wyoming with creative energies. And we still have not inked the rest of the programs in the series, but anticipate a presentation on wind and electric vehicles. And we were also talking with INL, and maybe they suggested talking about the integrated energy systems and how all of these different systems work together and the grids and that kind of stuff. And if you have any suggestions of what you'd like to learn in the series, you can always tell me in person after the talk, or you can email me at adultevents@tclib.org. Are there any questions before we start? Okay. Without further ado, I will introduce Drake. Drake Haydock is a technical solar sales representative for Creative Energy Solar. Based in their Victor office, Drake provides residential and commercial solar solutions to clients in Idaho and Wyoming. Drake started his solar career as an installer with Creative Energies and progressed into sales roles with both Creative Energies as well as with Namaste Solar in Denver. Originally from New York, Drake spent most of his youth in Virginia, where he became one of the youngest licensed falconers in the state and trained 4 red-tailed hawks. Drake enjoys spending time outdoors, skiing, rock climbing, mountain biking, and camping.
Thank you. Okay, excited to have you guys here. Okay, we'll start off with where solar started, and we'll take it from there. There we go. Okay, so first solar panel of all time. It's in 1883 by a man named Charles Fritz. Solar panels back then up until the 1950s had quite a low efficiency rating. That first panel efficiency rating of 1%, which is not all that great. Up until the 1950s, kind of hung around the 4% mark, so panels were quite inefficient and super expensive. Average cost per watt back then was about $76 US. Average cost per watt now is less than $1. So things have changed drastically. Solar really for a long time did not make sense for homeowners, but luckily there were groups of scientists that were determined to make it happen. Okay, so I started in the solar industry about 3 years ago. When I first started, we were dealing with the low 300 watt range for solar panels, so 310 to 340 watt panels. As of recent, we're now working with panels that are 400 to 410 watts, as well as some much larger panels up to 600 watts. Efficiency is also increased anywhere from 19 to 21.5% efficient is what we're seeing on the market now. And a couple things to note, as you can see here, some of the old panels were made of lots of different materials. There are really 2 main materials that make up solar panels now, and it's all made up of silicone. There's polycrystalline and monocrystalline panels. The polycrystalline is different cuts of silicone forged together to create a cell. Monocrystalline is a single chunk of silicone. Monocrystalline is the most efficient option, and it's grown in a lab, so it's a little bit more sustainable. All the panels we're working with now are monocrystalline. Okay, and how a solar system works. So, like we talked about with the efficiency rating, about 20-ish% of all the sun that hits these solar panels is going to be converted into DC energy. Your home uses AC energy. So somewhere on your system, there is going to be an inverter, whether it's on a panel per panel level or a big centralized inverter. From the inverter, that energy is going to flow into your house and first meet the needs of the home. Let's say there's excess energy. There's this wonderful thing called net metering that most utilities allow. So any excess energy is going to go through your meter and back onto the grid. Most utilities are going to store up those credits, generally on a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you produce 1 kilowatt hour, when you get home from work, it's dark out, the solar is not producing, you can then use that 1 kilowatt hour that the grid has stored for you, as long as the grid is up and running. Oh, click here. There we go. Okay. How long are these panels going to last on your roof? So almost all of the components of a solar system, from most of the inverters to the panels themselves, to the racking equipment, are all warranted for 25 years. So lifetime is more like 30 to 40. We do from time to time see, freak storms that come through, especially in areas like Teton Village. So we have a company that have actually started installing a third rail on the bottom of panels in high snow load areas that prevents ice damming from ripping panels off the roof. And since we started doing that about 2 years ago, we haven't had a single system fail under snow load. So that's been a great improvement. But generally, these systems are very low maintenance and will last quite a long time. And as you can see, there are ways to recycle panels. We do ship off all of our old panels for recycling. We don't do it ourselves, but we send them off. I think it's Arizona or somewhere where they take them apart and recycle the individual pieces. And then battery systems. Batteries are probably my favorite thing to talk about. I like to think of solar like the evolution of the phone. We started with the brick phone, then we moved to the flip phones and the Androids, and now the iPhones. And it's continually progressing and getting more and more efficient. It's a wonderful thing. I like to think of batteries of still being in the brick phone stage. Batteries, as you can see, have only come around pretty recently in the late 1990s. So it's still a relatively new technology and not necessarily super efficient yet. They definitely have their uses depending on what you're looking to get out of a solar system or a battery system. There are batteries out there that do work great, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But definitely a long way to go on the batteries, and they are quite expensive. Couple benefits of battery systems, which might not necessarily apply so much here in Wyoming, but some utilities are starting to switch to time of use rates. So generally between hours 3 and 7 p.m., you're going to pay more for solar than other hours of the day. So if you have a battery, you can fill up that battery during cheaper hours and then use that energy during those peak demand hours. So it can save you some money on your utility bill there. And you can, there are a number of utilities that will allow you to fill a battery without a solar system, so you pull the energy from the grid instead. There are a lot of battery companies out there, battery manufacturers out there. We have worked with these 4 in the past. Tesla is kind of our main go-to battery system at the moment. They offer a good one-size-fits-all solution for the average home. Blue Planet is kind of our commercial battery system. They offer a much more sizable system that could scale up drastically for those big commercial installations. We are starting to switch a little bit towards Enphase because they offer some smaller batteries and as well as super sizable. So if you don't want to spend 20 grand on a Tesla battery, you can spend a little bit less on something a little bit smaller. And we have, for a number of years, worked with solar edge batteries as well. And none of them are perfect, but they all have their uses. Let's see here. So, a couple things that are super important to know if you're considering solar. Firstly, would be the #1 incentive for getting a solar system, which would be the federal tax credit, which at the moment is 30%. So that would be 30% of the total system cost that you can then claim on your taxes in the form of a credit. And then super important to know the term solar coaster. That's what we call the incredibly unpredictable market of solar. In the 20 years we've been around, there have been a lot of different companies that have come and gone. It's great at times, it's horrible at others. And that's affected our business as well. We started pretty much right when we started off a service department. So any solar systems that have issues, we have a department of our company that does specifically that. And because of the solar coaster and lots of other companies going in and out of business, we've also adopted a number of systems that we never installed, other companies installed. Something went wrong and they needed help. So we do have a number of adopted systems as well. There are also tons of technologies to consider when thinking about solar. Like we talked about a little bit already, there are big centralized inverters. So if you've got 14 panels up on your roof, you're going to size that to the size of your solar, which does limit you a little bit if you want to expand in the future. So we've recently started working with microinverters. So each panel has one microinverter on it, and this allows you to expand indefinitely in the future. They're also more efficient and have lower failures. Oh, and there are also, on a commercial scale, a number of grants available. There's the REAP grant, which is for agricultural businesses. And actually, every business in Jackson, Wyoming qualifies for the REAP grant, just due to our low population. So that's super awesome. There's also the Blue Sky grants for nonprofits, which we're starting to work with as well. And then there's grid tied versus off-grid solar. A lot of people I've talked to considering off-grid versus grid tied, how to know what's best for you. We've done a number of off-grid systems, especially on some ranches, mainly in Wyoming, a couple in Idaho. Important difference with grid tied is you can be grid tied and have a battery system. The battery system is especially useful for when the power goes out. But if you're off-grid, you don't have the utility to rely on ever. So you need a battery system that you keep your home running, not just for a couple hours, but for a couple of days. If a snowstorm comes through, we really can't predict the weather. So generally off-grid systems require a lot more solar and a lot more batteries. And then wonderful thing called net metering. Without net metering, solar wouldn't make a ton of sense. Net metering is what allows you to backfeed credits onto the grid. So if you produce some solar while you're away at work and none of the loads are running, you can then use that solar, those credits you saved up later that night when you pull them back from the utility. And with most utilities, it is on a 1-to-1 ratio. So you are getting what you put in, which is great. And that was a super quick run through of a little bit about solar history and what solar looks like today. Are there any questions?
Have you considered doing access tracking in this area? Because sorry. Have you considered doing access tracking, either single or two axis? Because during the winter, the sun is just so low in the sky.
Excellent question. And we've actually installed a number of tracking systems. Not as of recent, mostly because they are quite expensive. We have done a number of ground mounts that don't track, but you can put them at the perfect pitch. Especially around here, we like to go steeper because then it never holds snow. Yeah, the tracking isn't something we've done as of late, just because price has kind of skyrocketed. Same with the ground mounts. They are generally quite a bit more expensive than just putting it on your roof.
So instead of I can't remember, said say it's $1 per watt. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's for at least for a solar panel with no additional equipment, it's less than $1 per watt. When you start to add in microinverters and labor time and permitting fees, you're looking at quite a bit more expensive. So it's not necessarily, it's $1 per watt for a panel, but not so much for a completed system.
There's a question on the chat. Fireproofing of panels and roofs as we are in some fire-prone areas.
Oh, fireproofing, yes. Yeah, so they're, especially since they're mostly glass and metal, there's not too much about a solar panel. It's going to catch on fire. I can't speak too much to any extra precautions that are taken to avoid fires, but there are a lot of electrically. There are a lot of disconnect points. So the microinverter, the actual disconnect we're going to install, as well as how we connect to the utility, is all going to shut off when the power goes out. So if there were a fire, it's not going to flow back into your house and cause anything to catch on fire.
Are any of the parts flammable?
I
They
mean,
don't look flammable.
no, not flammable, and I mean, you could catch it on fire if you tried really hard on some of the wires. But no, not everything's metal or rubber. None of it's meant to be flammable.
What's Lower Valley doing about net billing now?
Yeah, so Lower Valley is actually one of our favorite utilities to work with. They have been super supportive of solar. My understanding with Lower Valley is it is a 1-to-1 ratio for all net metering. So if you produce 1 kilowatt hour, you do get 1 kilowatt hour back. And it is also on an annual basis, which is a beautiful thing. Not every utility does that. Lower Valley, if you overproduce in the summer months, you can then use those credits in the winter months, which is phenomenal.
That was my question.
Oh, good question. Yeah. Go for it.
So I came from Vermont and we have a lot of commercial solar.
Mhm.
Isn't that more efficient than residential?
Totally, yeah, I'm on a larger scale, it's gonna be cheaper on a per panel basis. You're 100% correct there. Yeah, and Lower Valley's actually done quite a bit of work as well, installing some large solar systems. But yeah, no, on a commercial scale, it certainly is more efficient.
But then we buy credits. Individuals can buy shares of it. Instead of putting it on your house.
Right.
They build a big farm somewhere.
Mhm.
And you get all the credits from that. It seems much more efficient.
Totally, yeah, and that could potentially be some things that happen in the future, hopefully in Jackson as well. It's a little bit hard just with land, especially around here. It can be quite expensive to put panels on. So generally, yeah, it certainly is more efficient that way, but what we're doing now is the residential scale on a home per home basis.
But it's, I mean, in fact, in Wyoming, it doesn't matter where you put it. I mean, if you could put it in some other part of the state, that land's really cheap. And people here could buy credits, right?
We'd have to get that electricity back to here, which would be the tricky part. So
There's different companies. There's different electric companies in different areas.
correct, yeah, that's exactly what I mean, yep, so,
But the grid's all interconnected.
The grid's all connected, yeah.
Yeah.
right,
No.
but privatized. So it's, so that's the issue. So,
Different companies. that-
yeah, yeah, and they're not all willing to work with us.
Yeah.
So,
Something.
yeah, certainly.
Yeah, there's another question in the chat. As a birder raptor guy, what do you think is the impact of panels on various birds or vice versa, both on home scale, but also on commercial and public utility scales?
That's a wonderful question. Yeah, and I have heard of the giant solar farms that are catching the eagles on fire, which we have not done any commercial systems that are even close to large enough to harm anything to that nature. My understanding of that solar system as well is it was not your typical run-of-the-mill solar panel. It was much more reflective, and that was kind of the main issue. On a residential scale, there really is no concern when it comes to birds. We often, when we're going up and working on panels for service projects, there's bird poop all over. So it really doesn't affect things. On a commercial scale, we have not installed systems that are large enough to really do much harm there.
How does heavy snow load affect the efficiency of the panels, and does that lead to benefits of choosing, say, ground mounted versus rooftop, or things that are easier to clear the snow off of?
Totally, yeah, that's a huge factor that we consider. Generally, if there's anything over half an inch of snow on your panels, you're gonna see no production at all. So from a homeowner perspective, you can clear off the panels. They sell lots of long foam pads to rake them off. Especially in this region, like we were talking about earlier, we have taken precautions to install third rails to prevent ice damming. The panels themselves handle the snow load quite well. We don't often see the actual crushing weight being an issue. But you're also correct that ground mounts at a much steeper angle are going to produce a heck of a lot better throughout the winter months. Unfortunately, the ground mounts are quite a bit more expensive, so sometimes the cost doesn't always warrant the extra production. But a steeper roof is always the way to go. Generally around this area, our perfect pitch is 33 degrees, especially on a metal roof that's not really going to hold much snow.
Another question in the chat, could you speak to a hybridized system such as solar and wind to improve viability for being off grid?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I could speak to wind. We have done, or we have worked on a number of systems that are kind of hybrid. We did a system over in Pinedale that was mostly solar, and they did have an old windmill. Not sure how much energy it produced for them. The wind energy is quite expensive and a little bit less efficient. Sure, it could be a great option for off-grid systems. I just don't really myself know much about the wind energy.
A curiosity question. Have you ever seen any survey or any review as to how much solar energy there is in Teton County, like how many kilowatts have been installed?
That's an amazing question, and I should know the answer to that. We actually have a map of all of the systems we've done since a certain date. I don't remember how many off the top of my head, but that's an excellent question. And
Have you installed most of them?
we are, I know E1 does solar, but they'll only do it if it's paired with like a whole home wiring. So we're really the only like solar specific company, at least in the immediate region. There's a number of companies out in Idaho Falls and Rexburg. But yeah, for this region, we would be the main solar installer.
Get your email address.
I've got cards. Yeah, I'll hand out cards. Yeah. Yep. Or yeah.
Let's say I have a 2,000 square foot house, well insulated. How many square feet of solar panels would I need? What is the cost of that? And what's the payback? How many years would I save energy to pay for the system?
Beautiful question, and the hard questions. So that's good. So let's say you're really, it's hard to judge based off of just square footage. We like to judge it based off of your annual kilowatt hour usage. But if I'm gonna assume 2,000 square feet, well insulated, low usage, would probably be on the lower end of our system size, which is generally under 20,000. 15 to 20,000 would be the lower scale of a solar system. That would be 8 to 12 or so panels. Average payback in this region is definitely longer than a lot of other areas in the country because energy is so cheap and labor is more expensive here, all sorts of different things. So generally average payback is between 17 and 19 years.
17 and 19 years?
Correct, but the system is warranted for 25 years. So there is still a good length of time for return. And that's just the warranty period, not the lifetime.
And you're measuring just dollars, not like,
Correct.
oh, we didn't move the world.
Correct, right. There's moral incentives as well. And if you happen to sell your house, the solar system definitely adds value as well. So you could even, add on some additional costs there to see a return faster if you do sell your home.
There's a couple questions in the chat, but I have a question kind of along those lines. So there was that movie that Michael Moore made a few years ago that was really controversial. All the alternative energy people hated it. And he says that carbon footprint to produce solar panels is so terrible, and wind turbines is really terrible. And it doesn't justify the cost of it, but all the people for alternative energies are saying, oh, his stats are BS. So what is the carbon footprint of creating solar panels?
That's a wonderful question, and not sure I could give you a specific answer. I haven't seen that movie, nor do I know necessarily the exact carbon footprint off the top of my head, but it is the cells themselves are made out of silicone, which is grown in a lab. It's not mined. And the rest of the parts of the panel are really metal and glass. So, I'm not entirely sure what answer to give you there.
I can give you some links. Oh, sorry. I can give you some links because I did a study on wind.
Oh, excellent.
The National Renewable Energy Lab contracted out hundreds of studies and collected them. And solar and wind have passed all those tests as being, having a very low carbon footprint. Compared to any fossil fuel, we're talking about small fraction, given their construction, installation, life usage, and then final scrapping. So there's been a lot of disparaging things without any proof. There are a lot of naysayers on that, but if you want the links, I can send.
Please,
you.
yeah, that's the
I have
answer I
the
should have given.
charts.
This has to do with the batteries for a residential home. What are the batteries are you using, and the advantages and disadvantages of the batteries, the Tesla, the whatever?
Excellent question. Yeah, so Tesla being our main battery, I'll talk to those. One battery right now, I guess the main disadvantage would be the price being around 20 grand. And they don't last as long as a solar system. The warranty on the Tesla batteries is for 10 years. So if you're looking at a battery for the entire life of the system, that's maybe 3 batteries. So some of the advantages would be off-grid power. When the power goes out, the solar system is not going to work. It's going to shut itself off. So it doesn't accidentally re-energize the grid and shock workers when they're trying to get it back up and running. So that would be really, at least here in Wyoming, the #1 reason behind a battery would be off-grid power. There's not necessarily, especially since we don't have time of use rates, a financial benefit to a battery. It's really just purely for the off-grid.
You showed a slide earlier that, at the end of life, the solar panels are recycled.
Yes.
Are the parts then used to create these solar panels, or are they recycled, they going into some other product? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Let me pull this slide back up again. I can tell you that a lot of the wiring is going to be reused. I'm sure a lot of the metals are going to be reused. I don't believe the silicone is reused. The monocrystalline silicone that actually makes up the individual cells is grown in a lab and is really made to be super efficient. Could potentially be reused in polycrystalline panels where they're combining different types of silicone. But in the monocrystalline panels, which are the most efficient on the market, that specific part of it would likely not be.
Okay, question in the chat. What is your sense of percentage of homes in the county that have any solar panels?
Whoa. Maybe 10 to 20%, I'd like to say. We are seeing a big increase, especially in this region, of people interested in solar, as you know, hopefully their neighbors are pressuring them into it. So that's been great. Yeah, but we still have a long ways to go.
And then another one in the chat. Can you compare annual solar generation potential of this area with, say, Phoenix? That is, number of cloudy days versus clear and so forth.
Yeah, I can't speak to Phoenix because I've never lived there, but I can speak to Denver because I did live there and I was doing the exact same job I'm doing now. And at least the payback period there is much faster, mostly attributed to lots of sunny days. We do get quite a bit of sun here, but Denver gets a lot more sun. And at least in certain parts of Denver, not near as much snow either. So yes, the production is better and the payback period is short.
I was always an advocate that utilities certainly have to adjust to the day that they are facing every house being a net generator of electricity. But I was 25 years too early, so.
Yeah, hopefully the utilities start working for us when we're producing all the solar energy.
Great, Phil, Cameron, the Energy Conservation Awards.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
So I'm with Energy Conservation Works. We are a public organization here in Teton County. Based on a really unique partnership between the town of Jackson, Lower Valley Energy, and Teton County. Basically, we exist to make saving energy easier, to make reducing emissions easier. We have a variety of programs that enable us to do that. One of which is residential and commercial energy financing. We can finance a solar rooftop project. We work with creative energy on a number of these projects, both on the residential and on the commercial side. So that you can take a 5-year loan out with 0 to 1.5% interest and pay your project over that period of time. One of the things we're really excited about that we've briefly been in touch about is providing community solar. To your question about scale and efficiencies and economics, basically community solar allows members of the community or members of a cooperative utility like ours, Lower Valley Energy, purchase panels or shares in a larger system that's built in the local grid, so it comes back at the local level, and have all the benefits of rooftop solar at a more economical and accessible fashion. So you can look at purchasing a fraction of a solar panel if you're really passionate about it, or you can purchase a much more significant portion of your energy usage. One of the things that Lee was kind enough to let me bring up tonight was that we currently have a survey in partnership with Lower Valley Energy to assess community interest and awareness for community solar. So if you're a member of the cooperative, you should have gotten an email if you're so inclined. You've also got a bill stuffer postcard, and I'm here to make more of those postcards. And we have a survey that's open through the end of the month to assess interest in that topic of joining into a cooperative effort to build our first pass is likely to be a megawatt scale system that works well with our utility, Lower Valley. It works well with their energy provider, like the power administration. And by responding to the survey, not only do you get to potentially participate in a new solar project with the Energy Win $500 gift from Energy Conservation, which incentivizes participation in the program. But I'm excited to be here tonight to brush up on some technical information, and also happy to linger afterwards and share any more of the localized, more nuanced questions about the interactions with the utility and net metered solar, et cetera. But one comment, there's about 125 net metered solar arrays in the community right now, and those run the gamut from a few kilowatts, small residential rooftop systems, to almost 600 kilowatts, which is installed at the town of Jackson's wastewater treatment plant. First shared solar project in the state of Wyoming was constructed here. That's one of our projects at the wastewater treatment plant. So just really excited to hear some of the information Rick's providing, and happy to answer the questions that I can respond to after this as well.
Thank you. Yeah, especially thank you for those exact numbers there.
Where, several utility companies that are managing power don't want more than 5% of the total power to be non-utility. Have you heard that number? Where they don't want to have all these small systems coming in and aggregating too much because they don't have control to off use it or something like that. Have you heard of the number like if we quadruple the amount of solar power systems here that are really maybe a few would be better, but you can't get about 5%. I thought Wyoming has some regulations on that, but I'm not aware.
I don't know. I haven't heard anything about a 5% regulation.
Well, we're nowhere near that right now.
Yeah.
So we've got miles to go. I would say that from a technical standpoint, and this is right at the bleeding edge of my working knowledge on the issue, something around a 15% penetration rate starts to create.
Top closers now, or the boomers.
Okay, hi Zoomers. Something around a 15% penetration rate starts to create issues with the harmonics within the utility distribution level. So there are some legitimate concerns around that. We haven't touched that. Like I said, we have miles to go. So there are some, legitimate issues around that that I would like to think technologically we can work through. And then I think there was you made a comment about the state of Wyoming having restrictions on system size. And there are some perceived restrictions, I would say, that are codified in the state of Wyoming that focus in on a 25 kilowatt system size. Utilities like ours, Lower Valley, a cooperative utility, sees that 25 kilowatt figure as the floor, as the minimum that they have to allow. And then beyond that system size, they work individually with the customers to allow larger systems. Like I said, we worked publicly and privately on larger systems from our work with Energy Conservation Works. And then there's other utilities that are generation, transmission entities or distribution entities in the state of Wyoming that try to use the 25 kilowatts as the ceiling. To say, nope, it says 25 kilowatts, we can't let you build larger than that, as I'm sure, I know Creative Energies is hyper aware of that, seeing some projects elsewhere in the state that will go up to, 24.9, 29.7, right up to the cusp of that, so it's not contrary to what's codified in the state statute.
Yeah, there is no other utility besides Lower Valley that we've worked with that has allowed us to go over the 25 kW. Every time we've asked Lower Valley to go over the 25 kW, and I mean every time, it has been approved, which has been a beautiful thing.
I have a question. What are the downsides to solar and what are the major obstacles for people getting solar?
Yeah, I think the answer to both those questions would be the large upfront cost. It's not like solar is not going to be a damaging thing, especially if you're putting it on a new home that is built to current code. There's really no damaging aspect of solar besides in your bank account, at least for that first upfront cost. It does have a return on its investment, or else nobody would be buying it. But yeah, I think the answer to both those questions would be the large upfront cost.
All right, you started talking about different policies and things or regulations. I'm wondering if there are rules, regulations, building codes, CC&Rs in neighborhoods, things that are currently barriers to solar that, are obstacles in your way, or things that you see that would be, that other communities are doing that would be helpful to adopt.
Yeah, great question. I would say the first thing that's important to know is that no CC&R can legally keep you from getting solar. So they might try to drain you in court, but it is federal law that they cannot prevent you from getting solar. So that's important to have in your back pocket. The one limiting factor that we've dealt with with utility in Idaho would be month-to-month net metering instead of annual. So you can save up credits only for a period of a month.
Is that Fall River?
That is Fall River, yes. So you can't stock up credits in the summer and then use them in the winter, which has been very much a limiting factor for systems locally.
What's the status of Elon Musk's solar roof tiles? Is that happened, or is that happened anywhere?
Great question. Yeah, so they're Tesla's kind of pulled out of the solar industry altogether. I think they got a little deeper than they wanted to into solar. So my understanding is they've pulled out almost completely from solar and are now focused on batteries and vehicles, which is really what they do best. We've had no experience with their tiles. There really hasn't been a tile solution that's been affordable that we've considered offering. There is, I believe SunStyle is another tile roofing company that's just recently come to the US. They've done a number of systems, but we ourselves have not worked with any tile solutions.
I assume the ideal angle for the panel is 45 degrees. Correct?
It kind of depends on the region, if you're right up against a mountain, which way they're facing. Generally on a roof, our perfect pitch, utilize both the summer sun and the winter sun, would be 33 degrees.
But facing south, obviously.
Yes, facing south is ideal, but one of the cool things, east and west generally, although it produces a little bit less than south, it's usually only within a couple percent less. Maybe 5-6%, depending on if there's a huge mountain next to you or not, but assuming a valley. Yeah, generally only 5 or 6% less.
What's the reflection of the panels?
What do you mean?
Is there a reflection element that would affect neighbors?
Great question. That's something we've actually dealt with quite a bit with CCNRs. They have anti-reflective materials in them. It's actually included on the data sheets for really the two main panel manufacturers we sell. I've also had a couple HOAs actually come to our office, and I showed them a panel and pointed it towards the sun, shown that it reflects a little bit. It is glass, but it's certainly nothing that's going to be blaring into your neighbor's window, especially if it's, you know, tilted. That's got to be a pretty tall house for them to see any reflection.
Probably the school systems for the buildings to put them on, or as we transition to electric buses, on top of the buses.
Yeah, we have talked a little bit about electric buses. I know it's something our Utah office has dealt with a little bit. Not something we've got into here yet. I did just put a lot of the local schools around here on our mailer list that's coming up soon. So we are going to be bothering them, telling them they need to get some solar. And I've been working with Pinedale actually for a couple different school systems out in Pinedale that we might be doing solar in a couple of years on.
Is the 17-year payback factoring in the 30% credit?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay. The 30% pitch, is that 812? 30% angle, what is?
Oh, the 33-degree. I don't know off the top of my head what the actual
Pitch like.
yeah.
12, 45. So.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I should know that.
Do you have any experience working with portable solar systems?
We did for a while actually have a solar trailer that we would bring to job sites to power a small generator to keep tools going. It definitely could work on a small scale. Not necessarily something we would install. The equipment that we use is really meant to be on a home. I mean, you could go on Amazon and buy a relatively small solar plus battery system. Gold Zero offers a good solution that is portable.
I have a question. So along that tile question, the roof tiles. So I did also see articles where siding for houses, walkways and everything can all be solar panels. And if cost wasn't an obstacle, is that an ideal situation where everything is solar generating?
I mean, sure, yeah. Cost is the issue there, for sure. Especially in this region, vertical solar panels don't always work so well, especially if you're up by Snow King. Yeah, it's certainly something we've looked at. We've done carports before, so it shades parking areas, which has worked beautifully. We've even put solar panels in a zoo to help shade some of the enclosures. So yeah, really lots of things can be done with solar. They also have flexible solar panels, which would be on a smaller scale. Maybe somebody who lives in an apartment that has a very limited amount of space and they just want to roll out a flexible solar panel for a couple hours to recharge a battery of some sort.
But you make me think that it might be it might be an interesting scheme to have a portable solar, although that would be very large. So the national park, like Grand Teton, they have so many buildings open in the summer and then they're closed, then haul them down to another national park in the south. That would be part of that, but that's interesting.
Totally, and that's potentially where net metering could come in, and especially in those winter months where maybe they're not there, but they are seeing some production, could then help offset some energy elsewhere.
What's the calculation for if you have a yearly kilowatt use, let's say 32,000 kilowatts? How big of a system, how many kilowatt is your system that you would put in for that estimation?
Yeah, so we base our solar system based off of your annual usage in kilowatt hours. So we're gonna estimate a 16 kilowatt array might produce 15,000 kilowatt hours, it might produce 17,000 kilowatt hours. It kind of depends on pitch and a number of different factors, the area you live in, snow, weather, all those certain things. But we're gonna size it based off of your annual electric usage. And we're gonna size a system that does produce in kilowatt hours what you use, or potentially even more if you're looking to have a little bit of wiggle room.
So if you use 32,000 a year,
Mhm.
you would have a system that the 32 kW system.
32 kW could produce a different amount of kilowatt hours, but let's say you have a 32 kilowatt hour system. We're gonna propose a system that produces 32 kilowatt hours
In a year.
In a year, correct, yeah, on an annual basis.
To follow up on that, the wastewater treatment plant did the analysis, they've got, big solar arrays. So I had a solar expert do this research. So if you, let's say, you know that your maximum level kilowatts, you have to build 5 times that size of your system. So in its first level, it's 20%. So if you want to, let's say, you know, I don't look at your home, sorry, I don't look really industrial. So let's say you have a 100 kilowatt as your maximum usage. That's your kind of like the rating of your system. That would be
Annual or
no, rates. The rate. So that's the production rate. So if you want to be able to do that, you have to build a 500 kilowatt system. And then because you have 20% production, you could say you offset it. So it's 5 times here the size. That is.
No one else consumers questions, anybody else? Okay, thank you so much, thanks Drake, and the library closes at 7, but you can feel free to talk to Drake, talk to each other, talk to Phil. And you can stay as long as you like, and don't enter the main library after 7 over this time. You'll have to exit that door or one of these doors, but thank you so much for coming, and stay tuned for more in the series, and if you have any other ideas for future programs, please let me know.
Thank you.
What brands of panels are using it? Are they American made or where are they?
Well, that's a great question.